So Joseph was married 3 times, and in the 1885 parish register, it listed the father's names, and it listed that his father's name was Michael. And we can see that there in the middle document. So that does, again, show that the 1908 death certificate for Patrick listing their father being John is more than likely an outlier and probably a mistake. But as you can see, there's not much detail and just little scratchings across the various pages. Mariah Benson was the maid of honor at Joseph and Bridget's marriage in 1892. Then here are some other orientations of his marriage to Ellen Hart from 1885, shortly before Christmas. Their daughter Anne was born in August of 1888. So again, he was married several years before having a child with his wife. Anne was baptized on August 5th, and a woman named Kate Hart is her godmother, presumably her aunt or a female relative of her mother, but there is no Cassidy godparent for this christening. She's listed as being the third child born and the only one now living. I have not been able to find any records to show who the other children might have been. They're not in the grave at Calvary. If they were Cassidy children or if Ellen had been married previously, I don't know who her first husband might have been. Here is a copy of Ellen's death certificate, and then her daughter Anne died 2 months later at age 11 months. They're both buried at Calvary, as we saw earlier on the interment list. Then the third Mrs. Joseph Cassidy is the one that survives him. She's the daughter of Dominic Benson and Mary Fahey, and then she's listed as being buried at Calvary. So there are her marriage and death details. And then here's her only child. There's a picture of him as a little boy and then in his New York City police uniform. And he had a delayed birth certificate. He was baptized less than a week after his birth, and then he married in 1919 to Marion's mother. So piecing a new family tree together, we see that Joseph Cassidy marries 3 times, and his third wife is the ancestor of Marion Cassidy, and that Patrick Cassidy and Anne Murphy have at least 7 children, and we know that Michael marries Margaret Stephen, and Mamie marries William McGorry, and Joseph marries Lillian McGorry, and they have Nancy, and then Patrick and Edward die young, and Frank marries a woman named Anna Griffin, and then Michael and Catherine McKeon have a son named Joseph and a daughter-in-law named Nellie Butler. Here is a picture of Mamie in her youth, and then as a adult woman with 7 men surrounding her. Those are her 7 sons. They were born between 1912 and 1924. So clearly the story was that, Mamie was married to McGorry, we found out, and she sure did have a lot of sons. And then in the upper right is a picture of Joseph M. Cassidy, the son of Michael Cassidy and Catherine McKeon. And he and his wife would have 7 children, 6 of whom survived infancy. So getting back to the Michael John Cassidy, we know he's the eldest surviving child in his family, but his year of birth fluctuates between records. Later records start listing him as being born on October 28th, 1884, which is in direct conflict with his brother's baptismal entry from November of 1884. So clearly it was impossible for his mother to have delivered children just weeks apart in 1884. So he's 10 in the October 1890 census, he's 19 in June of 1900, and 29 in April of 1910. So the census records would indicate a birth more in conjunction with 1880. And then we mentioned his brother's birth being a physical problem to have two children born just weeks apart. The 1900, 1920, 1930, 1940 federal census records, the 1914 civil marriage record, and both his 1918 and 1942 draft records, they all list him as New York born. Michael is not found in the 1905 nor the 1915 New York State Census records. In 1925, the record for the state census records a U.S. born record. No record of baptism at Immaculate Conception for him, where his younger siblings were baptized in 1882, 1884, 1889, 1891, and 1895, and two cousins in 1882 and 1883 were also christened. So here we piece together what we know, and we know that there's a missing child born sometime between 1877 and 1882. Obviously, we don't have names, so we don't know anything about a baptism or sponsors. We believe that Michael John was born on the 28th of October in 1880, and then we have the records for his siblings and cousins beneath. Mamie, Mary, Joseph Michael, Joseph Aloysius, Anne, Patrick, Edward, Joseph John, and Francis Patrick. In 1910, Patrick is deceased and his family is living at 1275 First Avenue in the East 60s. Michael J. is a naturalized citizen and immigrated in 1881. Now, this is the only civil record that we've come upon that makes such a claim. But it would agree that, the brother's passport application in a few years says that the father came over in January of 1881. Multiple marriage records were created for the nuptials of Michael John Cassidy and Margaret Stephen. First, they were issued a marriage license by the state. Next, they met with their priest and celebrated a wedding ceremony, and the priest had to file 3 records. So here's the affidavit and the license and the certificate that went to the city clerk. And they indicate that he was born in New York. But the church would record records, and I got a note from the parish that said that he was baptized in Armagh. They say Immaculate Conception, but they write Armagh. And then the Department of Health also had a marriage record, and again it lists that he was born in this country. And his wife had the proper notation that they married September 20th, 1914 at St. Carmel in Astoria, New York. So when looking at Irish records for Michael John Cassidy's, we were able to find in Newry, in County Armagh, both a birth and a baptism from October 28th, 1880. And he's the child of Patrick Cassidy and Annie Cassidy, née Murphy. So it appears that Michael John was indeed born in Ireland, in Newry, in County Armagh, in agreement with the baptismal notation at his marriage record in 1914. Continuing search in Newry, we found that there was a John Cassidy born and died on the same day of the 29th of July, 1879, so he only lived 6 hours, and there was no recorded baptism. So he'd be the first of the 7 children born to Patrick and Anne. And then there's the death registration for and the birth registration for the child. So trying to find a marriage record, one would ordinarily want to find the man's name and the woman's name in the same volume and same page number in the index. So in 1873, there's a Pat Cassidy and an Anne Murphy at volume 11, page 86 in Armagh, County Armagh. So I was like, oh good, they got married a few years earlier, took a few years to have a child, but here they are. And when I received the documents, I found that they were on those pages, but the Patrick Cassidy married someone else, as did the Anne Murphy. So they didn't marry each other. So I was stumped, and went back and worked from knowns to unknowns. Now, I knew I had found in 1877, as I was hoping, an Anne Murphy in Newry, but I couldn't find the correct Patrick Cassidy to correspond. And then when I looked under Cassidy, other, spellings of Cassidy, I did find, and there is Anne Newry 6920, and then Patrick Newry 6920. So I wrote away for those records, and sure enough, I received that on April 7th, 1877, Patrick Cassidy and Anne Murphy married at the cathedral in Newry, but this time it was in County Down. Now, Newry is a city that crosses the county boundary, so it's a single parish that has parts of it are in County Down, including the cathedral where they married, but the parts where they actually lived were in County Armagh. And then I was able to find baptisms for Joseph and his brothers Michael and Patrick and their sister Elizabeth, as well as two older sisters, Anne and Mary, and they were baptized in 1845 through 1857. And they were the children of Michael Cassidy and Mary Ravey. And the marriage record from 1877 verified that Patrick's father was not John, but Michael, as did his 1852 baptismal entry. And then in 1844, I was able to find that Michael Cassidy and Mary Ravey wed. This is a year before the Irish potato famine began. And 5 of their 6 children would survive infancy. In 1864, Griffith's initial valuation was taken for their area of Ireland, so I was able to find him as an occupier with James Hutton as his immediate lessor. Then the valuation revisions took place from 1866 to 1871. They're on Monaghan Row. Again, from 1872 to 1883, the ink shows when someone's lease is ended and someone new takes over. And in 1885, Michael's name is lined through and replaced by Owen Quinn, who was in turn lined through in 1889. So I checked Irish civil registrations for Michael Cassidy dying 1885, or actually the research company did this bit, and they found that at 19 Monaghan Row on the 6th of June 1885, Michael Cassidy died, and the informant was his daughter Anne Cassidy.